Hello, gorgeous, and welcome to the Women on Top podcast. I'm your host, Valerie Lynn, and with over 15 years of business experience, I became truly passionate about finding ways to support and hear from way more women. And what we know to be true is that women thrive when they are in their favorite position, on top in business, in relationships, in personal growth, and on top in being real and authentic to who the hell they are. So I invite you to sit back and enjoy the Women on Top podcast. Welcome back to the Women on Top, everybody. I am so delighted and just have so much joy and excitement for this conversation today. Today, I have with me Jana Danielson, who is a certified Pilates instructor, as well as a perimenopause and pelvic floor expert. And I'm just so looking forward to getting into all of the juice around that. I haven't had anybody on the podcast yet to talk about these topics that are so important. So a lot to cover today. She is also the founder of the world's first patented pelvic floor fitness tool for women, which is just insane. She is incredibly passionate about empowering women to reclaim their health, their confidence, and their vitality. Jana, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, there's so much I could just immediately dive into, but where I want to actually start is a reel that you posted recently about death beginning in your big toe. And that really took off and went viral. And I saw that and I was so intrigued. So for listeners who maybe haven't seen it, can you kind of break down exactly what that phrase means for our health? And does death really begin in your big toe?
Yeah, this was part of a conversation I was having with my oldest son, Tyler, who helps me with my marketing. And he kept saying to me, Mom, you got to get on TikTok. And I'm like, Ty, my ladies aren't on TikTok. And then he took what I tell women, try this for 30 days. And he's like, would you do it for 30 days? Would you post a video every day for 30 days? And this one Monday in July, I was, really highly scheduled. And so I was like, what am I going to post today? And I like to come at the body from a unique perspective because I'm not a physiotherapist or I'm not like a naturopathic doctor. I did a business degree and then I healed my own pain. Pilates was a big part of that. And so I decided to jump on and do this video about the connection between the health of our feet and our pelvic floor. Because a lot of women, men have pelvic floors too, but my focus is women. And a lot of women, we don't know a lot about our pelvic floor. We don't really talk about it. And so I like to create these conversations and bring pieces of the body together that might not normally be put side by side. So why I went with the hook, death begins in your big toe, is seriously because geographically, our big toes are the furthest point from our heart. And then as I was diving more into the pelvic floor, I started learning how, because the shoes we wear tend to project our body weight forward onto our toes instead of holding it back a little bit more onto our heels, it starts to compromise the pelvic floor. So instead of being supported by our body, the pelvic floor is kind of hung out to dry. And that's where we start to get dysfunction. The muscles are strained to do their job. So our big toes are a fabulous litmus test to really understand how good is our circulation in our body, because circulation, blood flow really is the pathway to health, right? We sit so much these days. We have so much more, gut issues. We're constipated, we're bloated, and we chalk it up to, just another candle on our birthday cake. So yes, death does begin in your big toe, because if your big toe is numb, if it's discolored, if it does have a bunion or is pointing in one direction and not nice and aligned, that is an outcome of a part of our body that does not have what it needs to flourish. And the tissues made up of cells are communicating that to us. So it absolutely does begin in your big toe.
Wow, that is so fascinating and such a unique concept to think about that. I love the way that you connect it back to like the heart and everything else in our body. And I think that's something that is unique about you that stands out to me is like
Hmm.
how you explain the interconnection of our body and just how everything weaves itself together. So, okay, that being said, if you have something going on with your feet, like a bunion or
Yeah.
whatever, do you need to be freaked out? What can you be doing right now to make sure that you're like not about to die? Right?
It's such a great question because do you know what? Like, I didn't realize how triggering that video was going to be for some people. Like, they're like,
I'm
"Oh my
sure.
God, am I like am I going to
Yeah.
be like having a dirt nap soon?" And I'm like, "No, like, here's the thing, right? Here's the thing is that I am such a champion for wellness and I try and reposition health as opposite to what we've learned. We've learned that being healthy, eating healthy, moving our body it takes a lot of effort. It takes
Yeah.
time. You know, I'd have women saying like, I fell off the wagon. I haven't done my Pilates for 2 weeks. And I'm like, guess what? There's no wagon. Like, you
Yeah.
know, just like we have seasons, the body is going to ebb and flow. And so, you know, it doesn't mean that you have one foot in the ground. It's the body is an amazing communicator,
Yeah.
right? Pain is something we don't want to experience. Well, guess what? Pain is a way that we communicate with our
Mhm.
body. Our body tells us something's not quite right.
Yeah.
So I want to kind of flip the script on that. And instead of being like, oh my gosh, look down at your feet, I have plantar fasciitis, or I've got, you know, these hammer toes that are curled up, look like eagle talons. Am
Yeah.
I on my way out? My response to you is actually, recognizing this is a gift that you can give your body because there are such simple ways that we can start to bring life back into the feet, which is going to then, you know, permeate its way back up throughout the entire body. And, you know, I can honestly say, Valerie, that at at 21 I was on 11 different medications, was told the pain was in my head, I was seeking attention. Fast forward literally 3 decades, now at 51 years old, I actually feel the healthiest, most, you know, abundant, energetic, despite being smack dab in the middle of perimenopause. I can say with 100% confidence that my body is more dialed in now than it was 30 years ago.
Oh, that is such a beautiful testament to the work that you're doing. And gosh, I can't believe I saw that in a different interview you shared, that that was the feedback you received, that basically they told you you're crazy, like this is all in your head. So can you kind of share what that experience taught you? And if somebody's feeling really dismissed, maybe, the
Mhm.
medical system is wild. If somebody's feeling that way right now, what would
Yeah.
you tell them?
You know, the biggest lesson that I learned from that moment was we give up our power to believe that our body knows how to heal.
Mm,
And it absolutely does. I'm not saying that it doesn't need, you know, interventions or help
yeah.
from other people, but as soon as I took back my power to realize that, nah, you know what, I want to advocate for myself in a different way. I want to start. And I mean, back then there wasn't, you know, the Google we have now. So maybe that's a good thing because I wasn't able to like diagnose
Yeah.
myself with, you know, fill in the blank disease.
Right.
But that I think that was the biggest lesson, is that when we understand that our body truly is a system of systems and we have this physical body, but we also have this emotional body and this energetic body. And so before pain actually finds its way into our physical body, it's already been manifesting as some sort of suppressed emotion, maybe from childhood. And beyond that, there is an energy or a frequency, right? So
Yeah.
that think about our body like this ball of yarn, and how do we, or if you have a necklace that sometimes gets a knot in it
Yes.
and you're like, how do
Oh,
I get this out? That's how I one of the metaphors that I use. You know, there is small baby steps that can be taken that can pay big dividends if you truly believe in the healing power of your body and your mind.
yeah. I love what you said about like there are steps that you can take to really help with this process. And it kind of, puts the power back in your hands in some ways of like, how can I handle this for myself? And how do I become my own best friend and advocate
Yeah.
for what I know to be true? And along with this, like, I know you are big on talking to women about, the pelvic floor. If I'm honest, I hadn't even heard that term until
Okay.
a couple of years ago. And so I would love to just have you explain what even is the pelvic floor? How do we even know where it's located? Just kind of give us the breakdown.
Yes, I love this question. All right. So the pelvic floor is located inside of our pelvis. So if you put your hands on your hips, all right, those
Okay.
are the bones of your pelvis. If you reach around to the front of your body to your pubic bones, that is part of your pelvis. If
Mhm.
you reach around to your tailbone, that is another bony part of your pelvis. So your pelvis is this ring essentially.
Yeah.
And inside of that ring or that bowl is a group of muscles. Now there's 14 muscles, and some of them are what we call fast twitch. Think of fast twitch muscles like for sprinters in track and field. All right.
Yeah.
And then there's slow twitch muscles. So think of the muscles that a marathon runner needs, right? And then there's smooth muscles. So there's these 14 muscles that have different jobs. Some work more when we are out for a run. Some work more when we're just sitting at our desk. Some work more when we are delivering a baby or having intercourse or pooping or peeing, walking, right? The pelvic floor is literally
Wow.
involved in every single second of our day from the moment we are born to the moment we leave
Yeah.
this earth. Um, it is a some people explain it as a hammock, but it's more than that. It's multi-directional, and it holds up our pelvic organs, so our bladder, our uterus, our rectum. In a man's body, it's the bladder, the prostate, and the rectum. So men have
Oh,
pelvic floors like women do. Most people will know about the pelvic floor because they've heard of Kegels, right? Just do
yeah.
Kegels for your pelvic floor. But unlike if we're, curling a weight at the gym and doing biceps, we can actually see the bicep,
Yeah.
working and relaxing. How does one know what is going on inside our body? And this is where most people kind of go a little bit down the wrong path, again, because of what we've been taught.
Yeah.
So the pelvic floor is the floor of our core. Our abdominal muscles create the cylinder around kind of inside the body, so the 360 degrees. So the
Okay.
pelvic floor is a really important part. Imagine having a house with a roof and walls and no floor. Like the structure cannot, like the walls cannot stay up. The roof
Wow.
cannot stay up if there is no floor.
Yeah.
That's essentially, in a very simplistic way, what your pelvic floor does for our core, holding in our organs. And here's the key thing is that, and I've been explaining it this way to a few people, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, that is so good, that metaphor." So imagine your pelvic floor is like a follower, and imagine the diaphragm is like the influencer. All right.
Mm,
The follower
I like
wants to
that.
do what the influencer is doing, right? What
Yeah.
she's wearing, what is she reading, where is she shopping? And so if you imagine your pelvic floor looking up at that influencer, as we go through our teenage years as women, we tend to, right? Because we're conditioned. We want to be as narrow as possible. We buy these ridiculous waist trainers and
Yeah.
and fashion, right? I mean, I love myself a good pencil skirt and however, knowing what, how to care for your pelvic floor outside of fashion is important. So
Right.
when we take away space, from at our waistband, the contents of those organs, the blood, the lymph, it has to go one way or the other, up or down. And in many cases, because we live on a planet with gravity, it goes down. So our pelvic floor can become very compromised. Also, if we tend to hold a lot of stress, tension, anxiety, trauma in the pelvic floor,
Yeah.
right? We end up becoming, I mean, the term "she's such a tight ass." Well, that's actually that's actually the pelvic floor, right? Because your anus is a
Right.
part of that, squeezing, holding, and we do it like unconsciously. We
Yeah.
don't even realize that we're doing it. So now that you understand that, the pelvic floor is the floor, she
Mhm.
looks up at the diaphragm. When we stop using our diaphragm as the main muscle of breathing, the body's really smart. It just reassigns breathing to little muscles in our neck. And so we keep on living, but
Uh,
we start getting chronic neck
yeah.
tension, jaw tension, headaches. And the pelvic floor is still looking up at that influencer saying,
Yeah.
well, she's not doing anything. So because the
Right.
diaphragm isn't doing anything, the pelvic floor also does not do anything,
Oh my
right?
gosh.
So
That's
that's where the snowball starts rolling downhill, is from such an early age. So it's not a matter of
yeah.
if someone gets dysfunction in their pelvic floor, it's when.
I would love to just know what, give us kind of the history of like, why is this so important to you? Because it's kind of unique thing to be super passionate about. But also, are there steps like, is it diaphragmatic breathing, or is there like one or two things that we can give people listening in if they're like, gosh, I want to make sure I have really healthy pelvic floor. Where do I
Yeah.
even start?
Yes. Okay. So the reason that at 51 I'm so passionate about this was because at 21, which I already explained my situation at 21, my gut pain started at 17 years old. In the 4 years from 17 to 24 or to 21, it turned into chronic joint pain. I felt decades older. I didn't move well. I had like just excruciating headaches. And at 21 years old, I was peeing my pants when I coughed or laughed or sneezed, and I was having pain during intercourse. And, at 21 years old, what I was taught or what I had learned was that these kinds of things happen 2 times in your life: after you've had a baby and when you got into this phase of life called menopause. And here I was at 21 years old. None of the, no, like neither of those were a part of my reality at that point.
Yeah.
And I just, when my doctor told me the pain was in my head, I was seeking attention. I went through my dark night of the soul 6 months, and then I found Pilates. And that's what really created this curiosity. I just wanted to learn, like, why are we taught that the body is pieces, right? If you
Yeah.
have a stomach ache, it doesn't mean it's your stomach, right?
Yeah.
If you have a headache, it doesn't mean it's your head.
Totally.
So that is when I started like almost being like this investigative, like, Sherlock
So
Holmes
good.
for the body, because
Yeah.
I wanted to know. I wanted to know why this pain journey and the gift of pain. Now I see it as a gift. Then I saw it as like brutally unfair.
Yeah. Sure.
Why, first of all, why does it happen, and how can we in a natural way kind of unwind it? And so, to answer your question about what can you do right now,
Yeah.
the pelvic floor has, if you think about a spectrum, there's two ends of the spectrum. On one end of the spectrum, there's something we call hypertone. So too much tone, tension. All right.
Mm,
On the opposite end is the contrast, which is hypotone, HYPO, so lacking tone. All right. So just like any muscle in our body, it can be way too tight or way very weak, lacking tone, or
yeah.
you can be anywhere in the middle. And here's the
Mm,
beautiful thing, is that these next two things that I'm going to share, it actually doesn't matter where you are on the spectrum of hypertone to hypotone. To totally start to shift this conversation around pelvic floor dysfunction is breathing. We already talked about it, right? So, diaphragmatic breathing. So, very simply put, if you place one hand on this flat bone called your sternum, and if you cannot see
mhm.
us, it's just this flat bone. If you just go down from your chin, like 6 to 8 inches, right at
Yeah.
the top of the chest, that's your sternum. All right. The other hand goes on your belly button. Now, here's how you can test if you truly are breathing diaphragmatically or if you're breathing with those little neck muscles. And if you're breathing with the little neck muscles, when you inhale, your top hand is going to move more than your bottom hand. All right. So try that a few times. So notice which hand is moving more. So again, if your top hand, you're like a little goldfish. You're breathing with your gills and your neck. We want
Yeah.
to change that. As you breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth, that bottom hand, the bottom palm on the belly button should be filling with your flesh, with your body. All right. You should feel your body expand into the waistband of your pants on the inhale, and then on the exhale it contracts like a soft bark
Mm,
tree on 360 degrees. Do you feel that?
yeah. I
Yeah.
feel like I really have to concentrate on that. It's like only in those moments when you're like
Yes.
meditating or whatever that I am thinking about it that it happens. So is there a
Yes.
way to get it to
Yes.
be more natural?
100%,
Okay.
right? There is, so right now, what we, when in Pilates, we call it unconscious incompetence. People don't even realize they're doing it wrong. They're like, I'm living, so obviously I have to be breathing, right?
Yeah.
And yes, however, we breathe about 22,000 times a day. Okay. Imagine these little muscles in your neck that already have a job to do. They're holding your head 8 to 10 pounds on top of your spine. And now 22,000 times a day, you're asking them to do a job that's not actually theirs, but they're willing to help out. So again, when you are so excited to get to your massage therapist or acupuncturist or chiropractor because you're jacked up in your neck, and then 10 days later, you're back jacked up again. The root cause of that actually is the fact that we're not breathing with the right group of muscles. And so over time, you
Wow.
will start to shift that. Now, the other thing that I want to mention to your listeners is that if this is new to you, if you did this for 30 seconds straight, there's a really good chance you're going to be a little bit lightheaded
Mm,
because your brain is not used to all of this oxygen. All right. So that's how you know physiologically you're actually living your life in a state of oxygen deprivation. Oxygen stores are low. So think about when you're driving your vehicle and you're on low fuel and that little orange light or red light comes on and you're like, "Oh, I got to stop at the gas station." Our body has like a low oxygen kind of indicator. And so when we are yawning,
yeah.
it is a way for our body to take in big, like think of what happens. You open your mouth and you take in these big gulps of oxygen when you are yawning.
Mm-hmm.
So your brain is like, if you're not going to breathe for me and give me the oxygen I need to do my job, I'm going to make you give me big amounts of oxygen. So that's what the kind of the physiological why behind yawning is. You open your mouth, you take in that big gulp of oxygen, and so you'll keep yawning until the brain's like, okay, I'm at an okay level. I'm not low oxygen. And that's also why, and you're not going to breathe this way 24/7 per se. You're going to start 3 times a day, 8 to 10 breaths. But
Right.
what you're going to be doing is you're going to be strengthening that diaphragm muscle. So it's going to be working just when you are regularly living your life and your activities of daily living. But
Yeah.
here's some really cool stats, right? When you breathe diaphragmatically, you're actually taking in 600% more oxygen. So your skin is going to be brighter, your hair is going to shine, you actually are going to sit up taller, you're going to look more confident. You're
Interesting.
giving your parasympathetic nervous system, which is the rest and digest, a great big hug. So now you're communicating with your adrenal gland that you're not in this state of, running away from that saber-toothed tiger. Your cortisol, stress hormone starts to decrease. Like there are just so many things that happen from diaphragmatic breathing, and it's a boost to your pelvic floor. So that's like my number one hack is start breathing.
That was going to be my question is, okay, now we've got breathing, we've got our foot health, we've got our pelvic floor, right? And so where do you even start if you're like, gosh, all of these things sound like me and I also just want to level up in my health? Is it that, so it
Yeah.
sounds like it's the breathing, that's where we start.
Yeah. Yeah, the breathing is where you start. And then I would say the next most simple way to start to deal with this is standing. When you're standing posture, the optimal weight distribution in your feet is 60% in the wide or in the back of the foot in the heel. So the big heel bone is called the calcaneus. So we've got one big solid bone and the
Yeah.
other 25 bones are small little bones so we can run and jump and spin and do all these things with our feet, right? So when we
Yeah.
bring our weight back to 60% in our heels, and 40% across the widest part of the foot called the metatarsals, where the toes connect into the foot. That is optimal weight distribution. Now, even when you're standing in line at the grocery store, your core is engaged, your pelvic floor is supported, your booty is on, your hamstrings are working. Like, so from a metabolic health perspective, so about 93% of Americans right now are metabolically unhealthy. All right. That's
I'm not
huge. That
surprised.
means only 6% of people in the US are metabolically healthy. And
Yeah.
what that in a very, very simple way, what that means is, metabolism simply is how good is your body at taking energy from food and turning it into energy for your body, right? So the better your body is at that, the higher your metabolic health is going to be. Your organs are going to be working, digestion, circulation, you're going to be
Yeah.
sleeping well, pooping well, moving well, right? And so this something as simple as 60/40 in our feet is a really, really important ace in our back pocket. And then when we're sitting, moving the flesh of our butt out of our way so that those bony sit bones almost become like our feet when we're standing.
Mm,
And we want to sit up on those sit bones. So the breath, standing posture, and seated posture can actually be such a simple way to start to shift our trajectory on instead of like, aging, we get into this longevity framework
yeah.
on how simple our health really can be if we choose it to.
Yeah. Um, oh my gosh. I just feel like so much of this I never knew about. And like, why? I don't know. That's a big question.
Why aren't we talking about it? Why
Why
don't
are
we
we
know
not
this?
talking about this?
Yes.
If that many Americans are that unhealthy in that way, and we can make these shifts that really are not like staggering. It's not like you have to go out and spend a ton of money or even put in
No.
a ton of time. What is going on, and how many people could we be helping in the process?
Oh my gosh.
I know that's a whole.
I mean, there is a big rabbit hole here,
Yeah, I
right?
know.
Like, I mean, there's so many. I mean, there is, it's easier. Like, our healthcare system truly isn't a healthcare system. You might have even heard,
I
like,
know.
sometimes it gets referred to as the sick care system,
Yeah,
right? And once you're in, you're in. It's this like revolving door, right?
yeah,
And it was like fascinating to listen to his perspective on that.
yeah,
Um, I think the stat is somewhere around by the time someone hits age 60, they're on like 4 prescription medications. And that, that's a
yeah,
lot.
yeah,
That is a lot. And usually, those prescriptions, and don't get me wrong, there is a time and a place for that type of medical intervention.
yeah,
Absolutely. Right.
yeah,
However, it is really challenging for the body to find its true natural essence when it is being bombarded with, synthetic or made up compounds that
yeah.
mask pain, um, and then, have their own kind of side effect issues that you have to deal with down the road. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
I just feel like so many people that I've talked to even are like, well, it's in my genetics. I'm probably going to have
yeah,
to go on this medication. Well, this is just the way it is. My dad had this. And I'm always thinking to myself, I don't know that that's true. And I
yeah,
wish we had more education like this. And
yeah.
that's why I really wanted to bring you on too, is because you're such a wealth of information. And I feel like you're
Mm,
just doing it from like the goodness of your heart. Okay. So we have to, before I keep going, we have to talk about this.
okay.
Okay,
Yes.
so talk to me about the Cooch Ball.
Yeah.
Um, Jana, so everybody who's listening, Jana sent me a Cooch Ball before this podcast, and I've been using it. Also, the name is like kind of amazing. I was like, "Oh, that's great. But I want to know, like, what is it actually doing, and what is the Cooch Ball?
Okay. So the Cooch Ball was inspired by research done by a urogynecologist out of Reno, Nevada. And when I learned about Dr. Crawford's research, he was working with, he's a surgeon and he was doing pelvic floor surgeries, slings, mesh pinups, right? And what he was finding was years down the road, the same women were on his surgical table again for the
Yeah,
same procedure. And he started asking his colleagues, like, hey gang, are you noticing this trend? And the answer was yes, do your job and send these women on their way. And he's like, but we're not giving them the tools to not have to be back on
yeah,
these surgical tables. So he did this research, and what his research showed was that 90% of pelvic floor dysfunction was actually a fitness issue, not a medical issue. The pelvic floor doesn't work on its own. It works in conjunction with 3 other muscles: the inner thigh muscles, the glute med muscles, which are kind of come off the tailbone and wrap around to the side of the hip. So if you're laying on the floor doing like side leg lifts, that's your glute med that's working. And then also our deepest abdominal muscle, the transverse abdominis, which starts in our back and wraps to our front. That's like our internal waist trainer. So
okay,
that's what he
love
found through
that.
his
Yeah,
research, at the pelvic floor, when it's functioning, everything is dialed in.
yeah.
These muscles, inner thighs, glutes, and abs, are also turned on. as he was explaining, the outcomes of this research, he was talking about breathing, he was talking about posture, which of course we just talked about. And I mean, I had my studio at that time and I was like, okay, I can cover those areas, no problem. But then he mentioned a third piece to the puzzle, which was blood flow. And any muscle in our body that is lacking oxygen rich, nutrient rich blood flow is like a plant that's lacking sunlight and water. It just cannot flourish. All right. So that was my like conundrum. I was like, okay. And I owned my integrated therapies clinic. And so I did have pelvic floor physical therapy at the clinic and was sending, my clients from the Pilates studio over to the clinic. But I thought,
Yeah.
what could I do in my class from a movement, fitness, Pilates perspective where I could start to talk more about the pelvic floor because,
Yeah.
I would talk about it in class and it was weird. Like the energy just got weird. No one would look at
Yeah.
me. They were right. And I'm
For
like,
sure.
okay, wait, what is going on here? Like, why can't we even talk about this part of our body? And so at that time, my boys were much younger. They're 20, 22, and 24 now. But so I went downstairs to their toy box and I sat on every ball they had, mini basketballs, little spongy balls, floor
I'm
hockey
imagining you
balls.
doing this.
Right. Well, yeah. And then I called my husband down. I'm like, Jason, I need to know what this is like in a man's body. Right. So, what I wanted to create was a situation almost like a massage where if you had a knot in your shoulder, you might like use like a tennis ball,
Yeah.
but it couldn't be too hard because then it would trigger the sympathetic nervous system, the fight, flight, freeze, which would create more tension, which we already know that like almost over 70% of women are hypertonic. But it couldn't, if it was too like meh, then it wouldn't melt through these restrictions around the muscles. We have a system in our body called fascia. And fascia is like a spider webbing tissue that starts in our feet, goes throughout our entire body. And fascia, when it's healthy, interacts with muscle as if we were sliding down a water slide. Like they should glide. The muscle and
Um,
fascia tissue should glide. The reality is if we are over caffeinated, dehydrated, it won't allow blood flow through. So now the main source of nutrition to our muscles is blocked by this
oh,
fascia. So there were all these considerations, right? And so I couldn't find something on the market. I went to Toys R Us and I bought more balls. Some were too big. The Little Tykes playground ball was, kind of the closest thing, but it's a ball. So with the
yeah.
weight of an adult on it, it didn't do to the nervous system what I wanted it to. So that's when and I remember my husband saying to me, because I was complaining, right? I couldn't find something. And he's like, make something. And I was like, what do you mean make something? He's like, make something. You're an entrepreneur, solve the problem. And I'm like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, okay. So the Cooch Ball was born in 2020. Um, we found a really great, so there's the bladder of the ball. It's got three layers. The bladder of the ball is wrapped in this really cool nylon thread that gives it a little more substance. And then we add the rubberized coating on it. We fill the ball to about 80% full just so it can have a really
Mhm.
nice conversation with our nervous system. And when you sit on the ball, here's what's happening. And again, doesn't matter if you're hypertonic or hypotonic, the ball gives you what you need. It's kind of like a choose your own adventure book, all right?
Yeah.
So, if you are hypertonic, if there's too much tension, if the pelvic floor is like a rock wall, when you sit on this ball, and I don't know about you, Valerie, what you felt the first. Did you feel a little bit of
Yeah.
ouch the first time?
Yeah. Like at first when
Okay.
I sat on this, I was like, what is
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yes.
I can't like fully sit on this. And
Yes.
I was wondering what was happening. And so I was kind of like holding on to the armchair,
Yes.
the just
Yes.
at first, because I'm like, I don't know. But now it's weird because I haven't really been using it that long. And it actually kind of feels nice now, which
Yes.
is
Yes.
really interesting. So I was going to ask, because I was going to ask you about that and say, is this
What's
normal?
happening?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So if you have a too tight pelvic floor, usually you experience the ouch factor. That's what we call it.
Okay.
So
So that's me.
what the Cooch Ball is doing for people who have this rock wall pelvic floor is it actually is almost like a massage, right? So it is the weight of the body on the ball creates this interaction or this communication between the body, the fascia, the blood, our nerves, and the
Makes so
muscles
much
that
sense.
make up the pelvic floor, right?
Yeah.
So what you're going to feel when you come off the ball is, or maybe not the first time, but eventually once that ouch factor starts to decrease, is you're going to feel warm. Have you felt like the warmth or the tingliness yet as you've come off of it?
Just slightly.
Now, for some people, men and women, they'll get on and they'll be like, hell no. Like they just, there's too much ouch. And so, how I coach those people is, so instead of sitting on a hard chair or the floor, sit on your mattress of your bed or on a couch or a big
Mm,
fluffy cushion so that some of the cooch ball, the oomph can be absorbed by the mattress of your bed and then it's not as intense.
yeah.
Some people start literally with 15 seconds and then they bail and then they work their way up to that magic 3 minutes. Now, for the people that are hypotonic or lacking tone, when they sit on this, it immediately gives their brain a new experience because they can now feel the cooch ball almost becomes like the false floor. That now your brain is like, okay, I need to lift away from that floor. So it gives it something to come up away from. So the way I explain it is like if you're too tight, the cooch ball is like a massage tool. If you're lacking tone, the cooch ball becomes like a personal trainer that's teaching your pelvic floor how to do push-ups again, right? So that's kind of how it works. Now, we amplify the outcome by adding the diaphragmatic breathing, which we just talked about.
Yeah.
So really, it's really important to understand that when we inhale through our nose, that is when the pelvic floor is at rest. Okay. So when we inhale, our lungs are filling with air. So that diaphragm that's sitting in the rib cage, it's got no room. So the diaphragm, as we inhale and our lungs fill like two big balloons, the
Yeah.
diaphragm actually has to duck and get out of the way. Now,
Mm,
remember, I told you the pelvic floor is like the follower and the diaphragm is like the influencer.
yeah.
So, if the influencer is descending or melting downward, the pelvic floor is going to do the same thing. They're going to move in unison. So, when we inhale and the diaphragm is descending, the pelvic floor is in its relaxed state. All right. The
Okay.
elevator is at the lobby. When we exhale out of our mouth, and we narrow our waistband in the breathing that we did earlier. The lungs empty. The diaphragm gets to rise back up into its mushroom cap or open umbrella, its expanded state, and the pelvic floor watches the influencer lift, and then the
Mm,
pelvic floor follows with its lift.
interesting.
So the elevator goes to the second, third, fourth
Yep.
floor. And that lift is very different than how we've been taught to do the Kegel, stop the flow of urine, start the flow of
Yeah.
urine, right? It's very, very, very different. So, with the Cooch Ball, if you add the proper breath to it, there's this amplified, almost like fast forward healing that will start to take place because now you're rewiring your brain to connect the breath pattern to what the pelvic floor is doing. And, we talked earlier about the physical, the emotional, and the energetic. So for a lot of people, it gets to a point where, you might sit on your cooch ball one day and you might experience, like, you just might start crying, or
Mm,
you might all of a sudden just be like really irritated. So that's when you're starting to work through some of those held, stuck emotions that we that live basically in the pelvic floor. And from an energetic perspective, which is I love to bring this into the conversation because that's where the sacral chakra is, our
yeah.
sacred energy center. Our sensuality lives there, our creativity lives there. So it doesn't just mean creating life as in baby, it might be creating a business, it might be creating an art project, it might be, you might be writing something. And in those moments where you feel just really stuck, like, why can't I move this forward? It often can be a sign that the pelvic floor is stuck and
Mm,
that energy is just waiting to be released. So that's
wow.
why I love this part of the body so much.
What are some of those significant changes you've witnessed both physically and
Hmm.
emotionally in your clients that you serve?
Yeah. So, a lot of, I think probably the one common dysfunction in pelvic floor that people know about is incontinence, right? So
Yeah.
coughing, sneezing, laughing, and peeing your pants, leaking a bit
Yeah.
when you're out for a run. So improvement there, 100%. The night waking, being able to, maybe get up once at night,
Mm,
they'll start to notice that. Constipation is a huge outcome of pelvic floor tightness. Remember, I told you like the anus, like the rectum is one of those pelvic organs that the pelvic floor supports. So,
yeah.
um, constipation is a huge
Wow.
outcome of a too tight pelvic floor. Um, Bloating, cold, tingly
Mm,
feet, low back pain improvements. Just like pain, generalized pain or pain during intercourse. I
yeah.
had a client who was newly married and her husband wanted a baby in the worst way, and she just said to me, Jana, like once a week I just let him, you know have
Oh,
his
wow.
way. By the time she was, I would say, 90 days in, she was having pain-free sex, and 6 months after we started working together, they were pregnant, right?
Oh my
So
gosh. Wow.
these are some of the things that we don't realize. Even like young kids that wet the bed, that very often is a too tight pelvic floor at
Oh.
play. So I've even had moms get the Cooch Ball for their like 10, 11, 12-year-old kids
Oh
that
my
they've
gosh.
tried, like, they get some relief from chiropractic care. They've been doing different things. And it's once they, relax the pelvic floors, they're able to really get a handle on that. There is pelvic floor physical therapy, and I just want to really touch on that because not a lot of people know that there is a very specific modality of physical therapy all about the pelvic floor. And so it can be done externally to some extent, but
Yeah.
normally there is an internal aspect to it. So for women, it's vaginally; for men, it's anally. And the topic of men and pelvic floor is becoming. I just saw a Bloomberg podcast in June about guys on Wall Street flocking to New York City physical therapy because of their high stress job and all the pain in their pelvic floor because of that. There was just another Business
Wow.
Insider article, like maybe 10 days ago. They featured a guy who was misdiagnosed. I think it was for 6 years. He was going pee like 20 times a day. He had horrible
Mm,
constipation and gut issues. And it was all pelvic floor. Within a couple pelvic floor PT appointments, he was on his way to healing. So,
wow.
if we think women aren't talking about this, guys definitely are not talking about this yet. Even from a lot of heavy weightlifting, guys can get pain in through the
Yeah.
groin, the scrotum, and it's not like a pulled inner thigh, or it truly is rooted in the pelvic floor.
Gosh, I feel like this is just a master class all about our health, but there's so much that's connected to this. And I'm just shocked, I guess, every time I, talk to somebody like you, and my mind is just blown with how much we could be helping people. And I'm so glad it's starting to shift,
Yes.
but I'm really thankful that there's people like you that are doing things like inventing the Cooch Ball, which is such a simple method for
Yeah.
people that, they can utilize. I I know you recently, I think recently, you have a book that's called The Sacred Women's Guide to Blooming Better.
Well, it basically is the lessons that I've learned over the past 3 decades.
Yeah.
And so the book starts with me explaining what I call the seven sacred women that I believe are in each of us. There is
Mm,
the DIY woman, the stuck woman, the lost woman, the authentic woman, right? And I give examples of one in my life. When haven't we all thought like, no, I can do this on my own. I can put 10 more bricks into my backpack of life, right?
yeah.
And so I really wanted to kick the book off by having women understand that I see you because I am you, right?
Yeah.
And then the book goes into my three kind of pillars of mindset, movement, and metabolic health. And I guess that would be the one thing is that, you know, with meditating and, the mindset work, the cup half full and journaling, that is fabulous. Like you will take steps forward to improve your quality of life.
Sure.
From a movement perspective, getting out, walking, Pilates, whatever you're doing to move your body. When we move, people don't realize this, but when we move, movement creates a process where it's almost like the mitochondria of your cells. Now, the mitochondria are like the little powerhouses of our cells. They are there where energy gets produced. So when we move, it's like we're sending a text message to the mitochondria saying, hey guys, time to produce more energy, right? Whereas sometimes we think that, and don't get me wrong, I love a good flop on the couch too.
Yeah.
But the flop on the couch we might think like, oh my gosh, I'm so tired. I can't do anymore. It is through the basic movement of the body that we're actually producing more energy. So there's the movement piece, and then the metabolic health piece really comes down to, I share in the book how we came to this obsession with scales and our weight, and how the history of just how our governments have positioned, fat as the culprit, where it's really been sugar all along as the culprit. So then I talk about blood sugar and managing that and some simple ways to make sure that your metabolism, because we have two sources of fuel. We have sugar as fuel in our body, and we have fat as fuel. And to be metabolically healthy means you can flip from one fuel source to the other really
Yeah.
quickly. And so there are these three pillars, but what I would love, your audience to understand is that even though you can move forward with your health in a linear way in any one of those three pathways, when you braid those pillars, like, a braid
Mm.
in our hair, it like they amplify each other. Start to feel like the hands of time are being reversed, like this, aging beautifully and longevity. You are you are worthy. You are someone. It's not just something that you see, maybe friends on your Instagram feed, and you
Yeah.
think, oh, she's so lucky. We all have it within us to tap into that.
Mm.
And sometimes we've just been through experiences where we've been muted enough, or pushed down enough, where we stop believing in that part of ourselves. So that
Yeah.
really is like the essence of the book.
Wow. That is such a beautiful gift to the world, and especially, of course, to women. And I love that message of, kind of that you are worthy of it. And
Mhm.
I think that seems like a big piece of why you do what you do, almost, is that you really are giving women like their worthiness back in a way, or just reminding them of that, and from all different aspects of their health. So, gosh, what a gift you are. And just, you're such a bright
Hmm.
light. I feel like you're an amazing speaker as well. I just have to add that. And
Thank you.
you just feel like, not only, I love people like you because you are not only super educated, like there's just so much I looked at the time and I was like, wow, I didn't, there's so much we could uncover. So not only are you super educated, but you're so passionate, the way you explain things and the metaphors, like we can all relate to that. And I think that that's just such a great combination, and just, you're hitting the right people, you're really reaching the right
Thank you.
audience there.
Thank you.
I have a tradition on this podcast that I ask the guest that I'm interviewing to leave a reflection for the next guest, not knowing who it is.
Mm,
So I'd like to share what the last guest shared, and then I
okay.
would like to give you the opportunity to do the same.
Okay.
So my last guest shared, trust your gut and trust your intuition. It's so powerful and so strong. And I think we as
Mm,
women are more connected to it than ever. We know. We know when something's right, and we know when something is not right. Just sit with it and really listen to it, and ask yourself those questions and feel what comes out of that. Trust that and make those decisions for yourself, because you know.
mm. Amen.
Yeah. I know.
Beautiful. Thank you
It's
for
been
that.
absolutely. It's been a kind of a fun tradition just to, get to hear what people share. And it doesn't have to be anything. It could be something really short. It could
Yep.
be like a quote, or just kind of whatever's coming to you. So feel
Okay.
free to,
Okay.
um,
I
yeah.
am ready. So it's
Um,
it's a formula. It's very simple. The formula is moment plus moment plus moment equals momentum.
Oh, I like
Okay.
that. Okay.
So if we unpack it a little bit, is again, and I use this all the time in my community because
Yeah.
we've been conditioned to think that health is heavy. Health takes time. Health is wicked expensive. And if you are, raising a family and working a full-time job, and it's too much. And I want to remind all these beautiful souls listening to this podcast that a moment could be taking a sip from your water bottle. A moment could be getting outside and standing in the sunlight for 30 seconds. A moment could be sending a text to one person, one random person in your contacts that you haven't talked to in a long time. A moment could be just standing up from your desk, knowing that once we've been sitting for 60 minutes, 50% of the blood flow to our legs is decreased. Well, walking around for 1 minute negates that, right? And so it's these little small moments, and I like to call them, when moments turn into habits, I call them in rituals, because they're habits that enrich our life. So moment plus moment plus moment equals momentum. And if you can remember that, then all these small things we do during our day lead to huge ROI on the back end.
I needed to hear. I always feel like I kind of need to hear these, but that one especially lands with me. Just kind of in a season where I feel like I'm like, what am I even doing? You kind of get in your head and beat yourself up. And I realize, no, this is just building a foundation. And I feel like what you just spoke to is like those little things, they are adding up, even if I might not see the big, huge castle yet, right?
Yeah.
I love the formula. I love that.
Thank you.
That is
Thank
so
you.
resonant, and just thank you for your voice and your advocacy, and for choosing to chase something that felt so called, like you were just so called to chase, I think. And being brave enough to come up with things like the Cooch Ball and just be somebody who goes first. I admire you, and I just really appreciate this conversation today, Jana. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. It was amazing.
Thank you for tuning into the show today. And before you go, I just have one quick favor to ask of you. There is a really simple way that you can help support me and help support this show, and that is to hit that follow button on whatever app you're listening to the show on. I'm trying really hard to level up the content and deliver unique value and amazing guests, and just hitting that follow button is the magic that will help continue to empower that. And remember that the world deserves to hear your voice and your stories, and you deserve a place at the top.